Hi, I wanted to make this video because I've been thinking, and this time I've been thinking about undiagnosed autism. And the reason I've been thinking about undiagnosed autism is because I think that's what I have, and I can't decide whether I can be sure of that on my own or if I need to get someone else to agree with me in order to make it true. And when I say someone else, I really mean a qualified professional who would be able to provide a formal diagnosis. So I've been going round in circles about it in my mind for quite a long time, and I still haven't made a decision. So I thought it might be a good idea to make a video to help me think it through properly and hopefully come to a decision about what might be the best approach. And I'm also interested to find out if other people can relate to this situation. So if you've seen my previous video about undiagnosed autism in adulthood, you'll already know why I think it might apply to me and how I think it's been impacting me in my life. In case you haven't seen it, I can tell you that the thing that started me investigating this subject was when one of my children told me that they thought they were autistic. And this came as a complete shock to me and made me wonder how I could have missed the signs. And then when I started doing some research into the subject to find out more about what exactly autistic traits are, that's when I started to realise that I could relate to a lot of them myself. And I also found out how much of a genetic link there is. So strong, in fact, that when there's an autistic child, almost certainly one or quite commonly both of the parents are also likely to be autistic. So I might have to have a chat with my parents about this at some point because I've noticed a few things about them while I've been learning about this. But if the signs were all there, how come none of us recognised or even considered that we might be dealing with autism? I mean, maybe the biggest explanation for that is because if you were a child before 1994, there was no such thing as being diagnosed with autism unless you had a significant learning difficulty, and none of us had that. Anyway, for someone who notices everything, like me, it's been strange to think that all of this was happening right in front of me and within me, and I didn't realise. I guess I had quite a narrow view of what autism meant, so I was only looking for the more severe or stereotypical traits. And I do know people with the more severe traits, and there's no way you could go through life not being aware of those. So I'm not comparing my situation to that. But autism is a very varied thing and looks different for each person, with some people needing a lot more support than others. So I'm becoming more convinced that my experience is still valid, even though I've managed to achieve a relatively successful life. And a description that helped me a lot when I was trying to understand it was comparing it to one of those graphic equalizers that used to be on music systems in the old days. Each one had a lever that could slide up and down to be minimum, maximum, or somewhere in between. And autistic traits can look a bit like that, where one person might be so sensitive to something that it causes them to have a big reaction, emotionally or physically. And another autistic person could be completely unsensitive to that particular thing, and that could mean that they don't react at all. And everyone will be somewhere on that scale, but autistic people tend to be more at the extremes. And autistic people tend to try and control their environment to limit their exposure to things that cause them to have an uncomfortably strong reaction. And I think that's probably what I've been doing. And the more control someone has over their environment, the less they might struggle with their autistic traits. And then, of course, the opposite is true, that the less control someone has over their environment, the more they're likely to struggle with their autistic traits. So the people with the biggest sensory differences and the least control over their environment are the ones most likely to be noticed at an earlier age. And given that I've unknowingly been trying to make my environment more autism friendly, that's probably provided more of an autism friendly environment for my children, which could also have been helping to make some of those traits less obvious. Anyway, some of the things that I knew about my child but didn't know were potential signs of autism were having a strong preference for routine and finding it difficult when something changes, being quite solitary and happy to be alone, differences in speech, like an unexpected accent and a really wide vocabulary. Arm flapping and other sort of repetitive movements like pacing and walking in circles. Being pedantic about the details without taking other people's feelings into consideration. Having special interests and a huge amount of knowledge about them. So I didn't realise that any of those things could be signs of autism. I think I would have been looking for bad behaviour or lining up toys in order or being fascinated by trains or something like that. I didn't have any reason to learn about the wider spectrum of autism, so I just didn't know about those things. I definitely know a lot more now after having turned it into one of my special interests and spending many hours learning about it. I started learning to try and help my child, but I ended up seeing a lot of myself in the things I was finding out, and that made me dig even deeper. And I didn't know about autistic masking, so I would never have thought that that would apply to me. And if I would have guessed what it meant, I would have assumed that the person doing the masking would have been doing it on purpose and would have known that they were doing it. And it turns out that isn't quite true, especially for female masking. I mean, it doesn't only happen to females, but one of the reasons it can be more common for females is that we tend to be conditioned from a young age to be good at communication and good at noticing and caring about other people. So we have to learn how to do that in order to fit in, whether it comes naturally or not. So learning how to be a good girl can become masking for autistic girls. And they have no idea about that until either the strain gets too much or they somehow come to realise what's been happening, maybe because they have an autistic child. So now that I've learnt all of these things, I can list some challenges I've had that I think I've been masking to try and be a good girl and to be like everyone else. So, making eye contact. I've always found that hard, and I try my best to do what you're supposed to do. And I thought most people felt like that too, but apparently not. Being oversensitive to things like smells, sounds, lights, temperature that other people seem to be fine with. I thought it was just me being overly sensitive, but it turns out that my brain really does experience those things differently. So just because it isn't too much for someone else, it doesn't mean that it isn't too much for me. Having a strong need for information and needing to ask a lot of questions to get the full details. So this one can be difficult because it can make me feel like a nuisance, but I really struggle to let things go if they don't make sense to me or if some of the information is missing. Knowing that this can be an autistic trait makes me feel a lot better about it and helps me to make sense of those feelings when others around me don't seem so bothered. Being hypervigilant and noticing everything. This one can be quite useful, but it's tiring and can make me a bit jumpy and not able to relax. And again, it's good to have an explanation for that. Finding small talk is draining, but intense and deeper conversations are energizing. I don't like seeming rude, but being around small talk for too long can make me feel like someone has removed my batteries, and it can be quite hard for me to deal with. Being anxious around people, especially new people, and that can preoccupy me well in advance if I know an event is coming where I'll need to socialise or meet new people. And I won't know how it will go or what the expectations might be. Having a meal with people that I don't know is a particularly bad one for me. I'd certainly be planning to use alcohol to help me get through it, or I'd be trying to think of ways to get out of it. And it makes sense to me now why social events can feel so difficult. So I did know all of those things about myself, but I just didn't know that they could be linked to autism. I know that they can also be linked to anybody, but the difference for autistic people is the intensity of how they feel about those things and the impact it has on their lives. Those graphic equaliser settings are nearer to the edges for autistic people. And I've spent my life trying to find ways to manage those things, and overall, I think I've done quite well. But it has been tiring, and I think I might be running out of energy for it. I've probably missed out on quite a few things though, because I knew how uncomfortable they would have made me. So I've probably carried a lot of extra stress as well. So I'm feeling quite relieved to think that I've finally found some answers and that there might be a better way for me to work with it. And that's what's led me to wondering whether I would benefit from a formal diagnosis to help me find some better ways of living with these autistic traits or overcoming the challenges that they bring. And up until now, I haven't felt comfortable telling other people that I'm not comfortable because I didn't understand why I didn't feel comfortable, and I didn't want to set myself apart or feel like a failure. So I think that would be easier if I had a diagnosis to help validate how I've been feeling and what I'm trying to ask for help with. If I had a diagnosis, I'd be able to stop thinking that I might be autistic and that I could be confident that I am autistic. I could be more confident to stop blaming myself for the things that I find hard and can't seem to fix. And I might get some peace from the stress on my senses and the anxiety of social situations. I'm not looking to change my life, just for some understanding that sometimes I might need a few adjustments or to leave a situation if it's too much for me. It isn't anyone's fault, it's just that I need some quiet time if things are getting too much. But is a formal diagnosis the only way to achieve those things? Maybe for a child still in education, it probably is. But as an adult, can't I just ask for those things anyway? I don't want to waste anyone's time or my own money trying to get a formal diagnosis if I don't need one. But I also don't want anyone to think that I'm attention seeking or trying to get away with something, and I don't want to not be believed. What I do want is to be able to do the things I want to do or enjoy doing in life without them causing me extra stress or activating my nervous system in a way that's hard for me to recover from. I think without a formal diagnosis, I'd be afraid of being questioned about why I think I'm autistic and why I think I'm entitled to decide that for myself. But realistically, I know I've done enough investigating and taken enough of the assessments to be confident in my decision and to be able to answer any questions. And apparently, the fact that I've done so much research is another very strong indicator. I know I won't be able to prove anything without a diagnosis, but hopefully I shouldn't have to, especially if I'm not planning to ask for anything that will cost anyone anything. If you're interested and if it means anything to you, I scored 36 in the AQ50. 158 in the RAADSR and 150 in the CAT-Q. So those results indicate a strong pattern of autistic traits and very high masking. So, if I'm deciding to accept my own self-diagnosis, what happens next? Well, I guess I need to start asking for what I think I need and then see what happens. I think if I was assessed for my level of support needs, they would be low because the things I need are really quite simple and mostly involve just a bit more understanding and awareness from the people around me. I'd like some understanding about eye contact difficulties so that I don't feel the need to force it so much and that it won't be taken as rude or disinterest if I look away. I mean, maybe I could say something like, I'm struggling with eye contact today, so do you mind if we look out of the window while we talk? And if people already knew I had those challenges, I'd find it easier to say that. I'd like some understanding that I might sometimes need to leave a situation if it becomes too much for my senses to cope with. I will try not to leave, but I'd like to feel that I had permission without judgment if I need to, and that I wouldn't have to provide too much explanation, just that I needed a break. And again, I think if people knew that I might become overwhelmed, that would be easier for me. I'd like some understanding that I often need a lot of information to be able to get on with a task. And I'm not trying to be difficult, I just can't get my brain to buy into something if the full details aren't clear or if they don't make sense to me. I'd like some understanding that strong smells can make me feel quite unwell. So I can't sit next to air fresheners or people wearing strong perfume or clothes that smell of washing detergent. I'm not judging anyone for their choices, it's just too much for my senses. I'm sure there's more things I'd like to add to that list, but I think it would be a big help if I could start with those, if I can find the confidence to ask for them. I can't really imagine anyone not wanting to support me. I just didn't know before that there was anything I needed to ask for. I was too focused on trying to find ways to fix myself with those problems, thinking that that would be the answer. So, there we are. I'm autistic with low support needs and I'm diagnosing myself. I'll tell people what my main challenges are and what I'm hoping to do to help me manage those challenges. And all I'm asking from them is their understanding and support. They can ask me as many questions as they like if they're interested to learn more. And they can be reassured that even with this new label, I'm still the same person I've always been. I'll just hopefully be more relaxed if I'm able to be honest about how certain situations can impact me. And I couldn't tell them this before because I didn't know. So I wonder if anyone else has found themselves in this type of situation, realising that autistic traits are probably the main reason behind some of the challenges that you've faced, and then wondering what to do about it and whether you want to try and get a formal diagnosis. I'd love to know what you decided to do and what difference it made to your life, if you'd like to leave a comment. So I'm going to try asking for support with those things that I've mentioned, but without seeking a formal diagnosis, and I'll let you know how I get on. So I hope you've taken something useful from this video, but I think that's all for this time. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.